first thing I observed was a big stack of books on the table, and database books, programming books, like computer science type stuff, and none of them looked like they'd ever been touched, except for one book on the table. This thing was tattered, were kind of ripped cover. There were coffee stains on the pages. It had got a lot of use. And the first thing I said on my first day of work at Uber to Conrad is, why is there a Spanish to English dictionary on the table? He said, well, Ryan, all of the code is in Spanish. Welcome to Uber.
Welcome to the Early Podcast, where we interview the best and the brightest who've built the world's most innovative companies. Hosted by me, Max Crowley. Tune in weekly for new episodes, and please like, subscribe, and share. And now for today's episode. Let's go. Ryan McKillen, thanks for joining the podcast. Welcome.
Yeah, happy to be here. Good to see you, Max.
Good to see you. So your journey in technology starts in middle school when you start building revenue-generating websites, which is hard for anyone at any age, let alone a middle schooler. How did you get started?
It was baseball cards, right? I think like a lot of boys. I was at middle school age. I was kind of baseball obsessed. It was also like the dawn of America Online, and you go into like any resale outlet in New Jersey, which was where I was living at the time, and there'd be that
the CD.
Big box of AOL CDs, and so I was obsessed with AOL and going on there, and then I traded baseball cards in those like early America Online bulletin boards. It was just text, right? So you were a little bit limited, and then so kind of my first foray into web development or software development was building a little website that I could put my baseball cards on, which allowed me to, I guess, get a little bit more leverage on my trading or how I was selling, sort of transacting baseball cards on an AOL website. And I just kind of self-taught. Those were the days of Barnes and Noble, and so it was a Barnes and Noble book called The Project Cool Guide to HTML that kind of got me started.
From there, you get into MP3s, which is kind of ironic because Travis obviously started Scour in a similar vein. I mean, the next iteration of your website is you've got MP3s for click downloads, and you've got an banner ad placement on there that starts generating revenue.
The leap was one day when it was still just the baseball card website. I found out I could run some banner ads on the top of the website. It was like the 90s era internet company called Link Exchange. I think it was bought by Microsoft, but I ran all these banners on the top of my baseball card website, and then I just sat around and I clicked them all day. And then a couple of weeks later, I had a check show up in the mail, and it was $7-8. It was definitively less than $10, but I was definitively like over the moon, excited.
Made money on the internet.
Yeah, and then at that point, I thought that maybe I should, kind of retire from my lawn mowing gig, and then, maybe have the baseball cards take a little bit of a back seat, and think about like what I could do to like maximize traffic to a website in order to get as many clicks on these little banners as possible.
And I mean, this becomes legitimate, right? I mean, this generates money for years. Your dad helps you.
It was MP3, so it was very illegitimate, but yes, it generated.
Fair. But
legit in terms of its ability to generate some cash flow for me. Yeah.
What do you think the point was that your intuitive mind because I know you built like a scraper, you start to actually, develop, not just doing, front end website development. What do you think about the technology and the solving problems was sort of inherent in you that you just started jamming away at it?
Yeah, I think for me, like probably until like you kind of much later, certainly early in my career, like computer science was never the pursuit. It was more about being an entrepreneur. Kind of drove everything for me. And I was pretty motivated by earning. My early approach to programming was, I guess I wouldn't have called it that then, but sort of in my kind of current terminology, I guess you just say it was like product driven, right? It was like product driven or marketing driven, kind of like whatever I thought I needed to improve the MP3 site or like attract more people to the site. Typically, like that required some kind of a programming task, and I would just teach myself whatever I needed to learn to build whatever I needed to build.
So you end up going to Miami of Ohio for college, but you don't major in engineering of any kind. How did you end up making that decision to go the accounting route?
So I was 18, and I had a conversation with my dad that we both remember, and we like to joke about this one today, particularly when we're sitting together on the back porch of the lake house that I purchased for him. It's a fun one.
Little reminder.
It's a fun one to laugh about. But yeah, I was 18, and I told him, like, Dad, I think I want to become a computer scientist. He told me, son, that's a terrible idea. All those jobs are being outsourced to India. I'll turn 42 next week. So I graduated high school in 2001. So it, might have been a reasonable thing to think about at the time.
Directionally correct.
Yeah. So, okay, Dad, that's great. I don't want to be outsourced. Can't be a computer scientist. He said, well, you can't be a salesman either. And that was because my dad was a salesman, and he had a long career with AT&T that was, full of highs, but also full, also full of lows. I'm not entirely stable for a family. So we crossed that off the list, then got to thinking about, I like business, accounting. Those jobs certainly aren't going anywhere. And kind of that's how I decided to go to school for business and study accounting.
You end up majoring in accounting. You get a job in accounting after school.
Yep.
I think it's fair to say you don't love it. It doesn't go great. Take me through the journey, because it sounds like you're sort of trying to find your way a bit, but still have this interest in technology. What's that period like?
Yeah, I graduated with a degree in accounting. The summer after school, I took and I passed my CPA exam. I did 1 year hard time at Ernst & Young, public company audit. Absolutely brutal. I stuck around for like 13 months because with the CPA, there's sort of you got kind of like an academic like degree requirement. You have to pass the test, but then you also need 12 months of work experience. I felt like I had kind of pretty pot committed at that point, having already passed the test. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to suck it up at E&Y kind of long enough to sort of punch my ticket with the CPA. And then I was very, very happy to quit. At the time, my starting salary at Ernst & Young, this would have been 2005, was $43,500 is what I made right out of school. And then some of these, the kind of the websites that we referenced earlier that I'd started as a middle schooler, we touched on a couple, but there were actually a few more, we're pulling in like a reasonable amount of income, like low six figures. So nothing to really write home about. Significantly, multiples more than I was making at Ernst & Young, and then like more than enough income for like just a young single guy kind of living in Cincinnati to sort of take care of what I needed to take care of. So yeah, I left E&Y, and then for a few years, we call it like more kind of lifestyles, just sort of lifestyle entrepreneur thing, I guess. Just sort of relied on some passive income from these websites. I did a couple tours living in my parents' basement, did a couple of tours, renting a room from friends. That's kind of how I spent my mid-20s, just kind of bouncing around without a whole lot of direction, I guess, in Cincinnati.
It's just wild, because I think even now it's probably more obvious that someone like that, a talented, intuitive kid in the Midwest, can go to San Francisco and make something of themselves and get in the mix on technology. But I could see at that time why you just didn't put the connection together right away. You obviously don't major in engineering. It's just kind of wild, but it obviously worked out.
Yeah, I think to like a pretty large degree, I actually didn't give myself enough credit. I didn't really appreciate like how much I actually knew, how much I learned about how to program, how to build software, because it was just something I picked up as probably like an 11 or 12-year-old kid, because one, I wanted to make money, and two, it was fun. It was something I enjoyed. Run the tape forward, when you spend significant amount of time of every day doing something for a dozen years, you're gonna pick up a lot. And so I think I learned a considerable amount, more than enough to be like qualified to have a software engineering job. But I didn't actually even really I didn't know that or appreciate that at the time.
Well, and it's also emphasizes by following your passions is important, because you just did that all naturally. It just came to you. So you're in Ohio trying to figure it out, but you do end up in San Francisco. How do you end up in San Francisco?
Yeah, so I've got an uncle who lives out there. My mom's youngest brother. I mean, he's like a brother to me now. But at the time, like we weren't particularly close. But we were like he kind of reached out, kind of I guess heard some of my folks, what I was doing or not doing. He kind of called me up and he was like, right, what the hell are you doing like with your life? You love startups and you love technology and like you're in Cincinnati, like this is the big leagues out here, right? Like this is where you need to be. And he encouraged me to go out there and take a look. I'd always had like an inclination to like I wanted to live in New York City, which I got to do later, but I spent kind of some of my middle school years in New Jersey and had a lot of opportunity to go see the city in Times Square and Yankee games and all that. That was sort of the dream for me. He encouraged me, come out, have a look at San Francisco. I mean, that was, wonderful encouragement, but I think translates into one of the biggest pieces of advice that I like to give people if they're sort of asking about anything career related. It is whatever in the world like you aspire to be or you want to do. I mean, there is on planet Earth a place that the center of gravity for that thing, and that's where you need to be. That's where you need to be because there's so much serendipity that can happen when you put yourself in that geography, in that environment. The people you interact with, they provide you learning and mentorship and opportunity and leverage. You really need to put yourself in the physical place at the center of gravity for what you want to do. And I realized that pretty quickly once I got out there. So Uncle Al, his offer to me was just come out. He's got a place in the Castro. Come out. I got a room for you. Why don't you just come out and stay with me and just see if you can set up some interviews and find a job. So I booked a 2-week. I did have a return trip. It was like a 2-week trip. Kind of before going out there, I did what I could to set up job interviews. My goal was just to try to see what else I could kick up while I was out there. So yeah, I flew out there and then I ended up, I wasn't successful actually getting a whole lot of interviews set up. I managed to get 2. I managed to get 2 interviews set up. One of the websites I built when I was in middle school, high school, we didn't talk about it. It was a casual games website, browser-based games. And then like at the time, everything was transitioning like kind of independent sort of sites like onto that like Facebook platform. So it was like Zynga. It was I don't know quite the heyday of Zynga, but it was like definitely like Zynga was like really on the rise. I had an interview to be a product manager at Zynga, and then I was more interested. I was more interested in being a software engineer, but I think given my background, maybe I presented a little bit better as a product manager. But then the lone software engineering interview that I managed to get set up was a company called Working Point. They were making web-based accounting software. So it was kind of like before QuickBooks went online. Like they were trying to make some moves in that space. Yeah, I think while a lot of people would be sort of skeptical of a freshly minted CPA that wanted to write software, like they thought it was great.
They were excited.
Yeah, I interviewed with them. Ended up offering me a job in the spot. I was kind of halfway through the process with Zynga, and then just decided to cut it off because I had a preference to do software engineering over product management. I mean, that all happened like within a few days of me arriving in San Francisco. So then the second week of that trip, which I guess I thought I would be like job hunting or something, I actually started my job at Working Point that second week. So yeah, I did a week of work to kind of kick things off, and then I came home for Thanksgiving and back to Cincinnati. I had 2 weeks to kind of pack up my life, and then sort of 2 weeks later, I came back. Yeah, and that was like fall. It was like Thanksgiving 2009.
All right, because like somewhat, I'm centering the podcast around this question of what's sort of the defining pivot or year in your career, and it sounds like for you, it's this, wayward a bit in Ohio, trying to figure it out. Uncle Al, the man, gives you the leap of faith to go to San Francisco. It turns into a job quickly. You make the move.
Yeah.
And then
the other fun part of that story is I was supposed to just stay with him for 2 weeks. So then I ended up living with him for 5 years, which is why like he's my brother. He's not my uncle. He's my brother.
Oh, but he got more than he bargained for when you were basically there forever.
Yeah, just a bit.
How do you end up at Uber then? So you go out there, you move to San Francisco, you're doing the gig. How long are you at the accounting software company, and then how do you end up at Uber?
I wasn't there like that long. I guess I started in November 2009, and then probably started talking to the Uber guys in like May of 2010, which is right around when they launched, and then I joined in July. And so the connection there was a guy named Ryan Graves, first employee, first CEO of Uber. He and I both went to the same university, Miami University in Ohio. I was a year ahead of him. Didn't know each other, but we had a lot of mutual friends. I had a mutual friend. One of these mutual friends was a fraternity brother. And then he knew I was out in San Francisco. Ryan was kind of like in transition. He and Molly were moving from Chicago, but he was out there a lot on his own. And so, our friend Nanelle and Bert put us in touch. Ryan and I kind of, both from the Midwest, both kind of new in town, got together, had a few beers, hung out. I think it was a Giants game. And, it was some just say, hey, I think we're both kind of in the city and, needed a friend. And, but there was certainly like a lot of ambition around tech and startups and everything. And so it was some of that, talking shop. And then he really was, maybe he was recruiting me the whole time, but like encouraging me to join Uber. I actually like put up some resistance for 2 or 3 months. I really, really, really wanted to join, but I was also just felt fiercely loyal to my boss. His name was Dennis Faust. He was the CTO at Working Point. And like, he gave me my first gig out there. I felt this like really, this kind of bit maybe in debt and this sort of really fierce sense of loyalty. And I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to leave Dennis because he kind of gave me my shot. I mean, it would have been a pretty catastrophic mistake. And I stuck around, but then I was actually done a favor. The Working Point was not doing well. Customer acquisition was a challenge. And then so the VC that had funded the company, they kind of came in, they had an ability to take control. But they came in and they were pulling people to a conference room and like very unceremoniously like firing people. I've never actually seen like just the actual investor come in and start like terminating people.
Casey.
Yeah. And then so like as they're, bringing people in to like axe them, I got my phone. I'm texting Graves. I'm like, dude, I'm in.
Before I could possibly get fired, I still have my job.
Yeah.
But I'm ready.
And then, ironically, like there were the company had maybe 12 or 13 people. I actually didn't get fired. They kept 4 there. They kept 4 of us because they still wanted, I don't know, make it go with the company or, try to sell it, or so they kind of needed some like engineers to keep the lights on. So I didn't get fired. But like at that point I was pissed. And then so I got to, kind of do a bit of a rage quit. And that was what allowed me to say yes to Uber. Which I guess the lesson there is like, man, like you got to be loyal. You got to be loyal to yourself. You're the, I got to be the startup of Ryan. You got to be the startup of Max. And really, I think you really got to look after yourself first, making big decisions like this, because I wouldn't have done that. It would have been a massive mistake for me. Like, fortunately, there was this sort of like exogenous thing that happened at Working Point that allowed me to make a decision. I wouldn't have made a decision on my own.
There's also just the universe does random weird things that does help you kind of lead the way, which is pretty wild. Why were you interested in Uber though? Because obviously at that time there's other things, the Zanga job, which I understand. What was the interest in Uber?
I really had this thing about like I wanted to be early. Other than I wanted to be on the engineering team, write software. Really, the only other like hard criteria I had for myself was I wanted to be one of the first 5 employees at a company. And so like, Uber fit that bill because I had the opportunity to be the third. It was cool. It was obviously cool, like what they were doing. But I think this is really consistent with a lot of people that joined Uber early on. I mean, I had an incredible first experience with Uber. I was working late at the office, the Working Point office. It was on Sansom Street in San Francisco. It was super late, probably around 11. I was the only one in the office, and it was absolutely pissing rain. And I was ready to kind of shut it down for the evening. And Graves had given me like a early access code to Uber. This was like before we launched publicly, and I'm like, okay, I'm actually gonna give this thing a go. Open the app, request a ride, go down the elevator, and then the building had like a pretty grand lobby, high ceilings, and just sort of tons of glass at the front of the building, right on Sansom. I remember the elevator opening up, and then just out on the street there was a Cadillac Escalade, headlights, right? So they're just all flared up because it's pissing rain and everything, and this sort of blinged out Escalade. Gentleman, so like, of course, got to know a little bit. His name was Roger Kahuna. He was the original Uber driver, and he was the original. His fleet of black cars, SUVs, were the first to actually go onto the system. It was Roger. He was standing out in front of the Escalade with one of those just like massive, driver, like golf umbrellas or whatever, like just waiting for me. And then kind of go out there, and that was when early on it was all so high touch with like the level of service you got from the drivers, and everybody was like a coat and tie, and really high quality cars and everything. It was like, what a great first experience.
So you take the job. Uber officially launches May 31st, 2010. You start in
just after 4th of July. Yeah, I actually went to Hawaii with a friend of mine. Kind of I knew it was going to be a grind. And so we did a little trip to Hawaii, and then it was right after 4th of July.
All right, so set the scene for us. You're the fourth person. There's three people.
Third of Hawaii, but we had, so it was Ryan, it was Conrad Whelan, and then we had an intern named Dom Narducci. And so I was technically the fourth one there.
There's 4 tables, 4 desks jammed together. There's no Travis in the mix yet.
Yeah.
What's his relationship with the company at that time? What's going on day to day? You get there, the app is developed in Spanish. I mean, take us through sort of just the first couple of days of Uber in July 2010.
Yeah, I mean, maybe even just a little bit before that, I had kind of, once I got to know Ryan, like I still like had to interview. So Conrad was the original engineer. They had a coding challenge that I had to do, like a take home thing. I spent significant time on it. We can talk maybe a little bit more about sort of hiring philosophy, about this kind of approach to coding challenges, both what you get from it like technically, but then also what it sort of tells you culturally about people. But I had a couple of long nights because I was working my other job and kind of knocked out that coding challenge. And then Uber didn't really have an office. I met Conrad for the first time just at Schroeder's, just like this German pub in San Francisco in the financial district. So I sat down, we got to talking. Similar story in some ways. Like he is a single guy. Like he had moved, he had relocated to San Francisco, like for the Uber job, kind of new to the city, sort of just grinding his face off at work and didn't know a lot of people yet. And so we're kind of there, and we're talking, and we're kind of having some beers and sort of getting to know each other. Having some more beers, and I'm just kind of waiting for the interview to start. And then we're like, we're 4 hours and God knows how many beers in at that point. I'm like, I was like, this isn't really about an interview. Like he's already seen my code. And just the Conrad needs a friend.
You guys were dating at that point.
Yeah. Kind of, I don't know, stumbled out of there at 1 a.m. and we always, for a number of years, we always do the Schroeder's, 1 year. Yeah. 1 year, I guess, kind of, dating anniversary. So I knew him. And then when I walked in on the first day, Conrad and Ryan were there. Of course, Dom was there. And our office we didn't have our own office. There was a company called Zozi. And this 2010, this was like the heyday of Groupon clones. And so Zozi was a Groupon clone. It was like focused on like adventure experiences and travel and everything. We had like a conference room in the Zozi office, which was our office. And so that's where I went on my first day. And I remember, never forget, and walking through the door. Yeah, the other 3 were in there, and the first thing I observed was a big stack of books on the table, database books, programming books, like computer science type stuff, and none of them looked like they'd ever been touched, except for one book on the table. And this thing was tattered. We were kind of ripped cover. There were coffee stains on the pages. It had got a lot of use. And the first thing I said on my first day of work at Uber to Conrad is, why is there a Spanish to English dictionary on the table? He said, well, Ryan, all of the code is in Spanish. Welcome to Uber.
Why was the code written in Spanish?
The original Uber idea kind of came out of Garrett's head. He and Travis funded it, incubated it. they're capable engineers. They had a lot of other things. They had a lot of other things going as well, and so they didn't write the code. So Conrad was one of Garrett's grad school roommates in their EE program, and then another guy named Oscar Salazar. And so Garrett kind of outsourced the prototyping of the original Uber app to Oscar. It's kind of a cosmopolitan guy living in, I think he was living in New York City at the time. And then Oscar outsourced it to a buddy of his named Jose in Mexico. And Jose, he kind of hacked the first thing together in Spanish.
I mean, how long were there still remnants of Spanish being in the code?
A few months. It inhibited our sort of ability to like work with the code base. It's difficult, like I think for any software engineering, you come into a new code base and you kind of got to get your head around it. It was written in PHP. Of course, like functions and reserved words and like all that stuff are in English, but then all of the variable names in the code were in Spanish, and then importantly, like all of the big blots of comments that were kind of detailed what certain functions, business logic, that kind of stuff were intended to do. And so, yeah, I mean, we're just, in there kind of, translating. We spent like pretty considerable amount of time just trying to kind of keep the code the same, but massage the variable names and the comments and everything into English so we could a little bit better get our hands around it. I mean, Conrad was already kind of, pretty deep into the translation project. And yeah, I mean, I think within a couple months, we were running a pure English code base.
What are those first couple of weeks like? Travis, you were meeting with Travis on Fridays at the sort of infamous jam pad at his place. What was happening at that time?
The jam pad was TK's place. He would cop into the Uber office, often, but sporadically, pretty consistently. We were over at his place on Fridays. It was Uber, but like it was also like his whole angel portfolio. He was active on a lot of stuff. Yeah, the jam pad and jam sessions and that was our opportunity to have access to Travis's mind and have him kind of advise us on what we should be doing, building, optimizing for.
In October 2010, the infamous cease and desist happens. What's the lead up to that? Business is growing, I assume. I mean, still small, but
yeah, it was very small. It was growing pretty modestly, like week over week, kind of over the course of that summer. September, October was I think when we had our first inflection point. Ryan was out, Conrad was there, Don was there, and Austin Geit had started at this point. Yeah, we're just hanging out in a little conference room in like the Zozi office, and I'm like, all of a sudden, 4 or 5 people in like cheap suits, like they had badges. They looked plastic, it looked like toys, but cheap suits and these badges. They came in and they had a clipboard, and it was a black and white like full 8.5 by 11 like photo of Graves, and they had it on this clipboard, and they passed it around, like they held it up in front of everybody's face, and they were saying, "Have you seen this man? Have you seen this man?"
Yes, once or twice.
And it's like, oh shit, we're gonna get arrested.
Party's over.
Yeah, and then they actually slapped down like 2 cease and desist orders like on the table. Like Ashley got served these big thick packets of paper, and they kind of they slammed them down on the table. And it was the California Public Utility Commission, who weirdly they regulate livery, which is like the term for black car services. So like licensed ride for hire, that's not taxi. That's like a regulated at the state level. The PUC Public Utility Commission, by the way, which again kind of weird that they regulate black car, but they did. You have the San Francisco MTA, which regulated taxi. And so taxi being anything kind of, hail, like kind of ride for hire with a medallion. And then so the cease and desist from the PUC was for like operating an illegal car service, which in fact we weren't, because all of the drivers on the Uber service, they had like proper liberally licenses and commercial licenses, insurance, that sort of thing. And then the SFMTA, like they actually had us, because unless you were a cab company, it's actually a cab company, you weren't allowed to have cab in your name.
And the name at the time is Uber cab.
Uber cab. So, get on the phone, we're trying to get a hold of Graves, trying to get a hold of Travis. Yeah, you tell me what you kind of maybe want to unpack there, but as that got press coverage, it really put the Uber name and kind of out there in the newspapers and on the news, and then it was really a great way for people to kind of hear about what we were doing, and then that's when we really started to see the business inflect at that point, and then, you get the kind of hockey stick growth that everybody's hoping for in their startup.
I mean, what are the next after the cease and desist lands? What are the next couple of hours like? What are the next couple of days like? I mean, do you think this thing's going to shut down? You think the sort of the game is over? What's just going? What are those conversations like?
We got a hold of Travis and Ryan. We got a hold of Garrett. I wish I remembered where it was. There's some Chinese restaurant near the office. We all gathered and started strategize. It wasn't one of those, oh God, the gig is up. But I mean, I think we really did feel like we had a fight on our hands at that point. And I mean, that's when Travis really activated. I mean, he was from the time I started. I mean, he was always present. He was always invested and everything. But that's when, seeing him at the jam pad on Fridays or him kind of popping in the office. I remember the sort of the next week, it showed up on Monday, got there relatively early like I usually did, and Travis was already sitting there in the office, probably late that Monday night. I'm probably ready to go home, and Travis is still sitting there at the office, right? Tuesday, Wednesday. So that went on for a couple of weeks, and that was pretty soon after that where he stepped in as CEO.
Was there any doubt that you guys were going to fight this thing?
When we really got into it was actually pretty simple because the PUC actually didn't have anything on us, as I said earlier. And then the MTA, okay, we can't have cab in our name. So that's how Uber Cab became Uber. And the original logo was Garrett made it. It was two U's. It was a U, and then there was another U tipped on its side to make a C. So it was this red UC, and then under it in black it said Uber Cab. I took that logo in Photoshop and then just kind of cut it in. I just basically just cut it in half. So I cut out the C, cut out the cab, and then the Uber, which was under the U, moved it on the top of the U, and that was kind of the logo that we grew up on. But I mean, it was actually kind of as simple as a rebranding exercise from Uber Cab to Uber, and then we were kind of compliant at that point. And then, I mean, obviously, just from a branding standpoint, it's a better name, it's a more powerful brand. Became a verb. Yeah, it ended up being fairly simple, I think, to comply in San Francisco. But then, as we grew and we launched other cities and other countries, that kind of common theme of running into regulatory issues was pretty common. In most cases, I think that they were more just kind of unfounded kind of resistance from taxi companies. But then other places where regulatory regimes made it a bit more difficult. But what we always had going for us was this massive constituency of riders and drivers that really wanted the service, felt it was best for them and best for the city and best for the economy and kind of all these other things. And we were always pretty effective at kind of mobilizing that.
Yeah, I mean, it foreshadows the issues that Uber would have globally with regulatory structures, but then also is the beginning of Uber's fight and might, which without that, the company wouldn't exist.
Yeah, and it was just, we were it was just out of the gate. It kind of we had that mentality.
What is the before and after of no Travis to Travis being the first one in the last one out every day?
Like I said, he was always around. He always had a presence and an impact. But yeah, I mean, just the dial just getting turned up from DEFCON 9 to DEFCON 99. I mean, he sets really set the tone, around there. People always ask what was it like to work with Travis? And I mean, first of all, nobody in the entire company worked harder. Nobody. It wasn't even, it was just evidence to everybody. And you want to grind it out culture, well, then you got to grind harder than everyone else, lead by example, tone at the top. That's how he led, not just in terms of the effort and the hustle, but really across the board, everything that was important to him, everything that was important to the company. He led by example. He was great, at setting setting the tone.
In retrospect, as you sort of just look back at those times with Travis specifically, anything else you sort of define his entrepreneurial instincts by, his problem solving, his smarts? What stands out?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that he is typically the smartest guy in the room, but he never acts like it. He's very collaborative. I would say one of his superpowers, and where you really see the intelligence manifest, is that like he could sit across, or he could sit in a room with a subject matter expert, and that person knows more than him on a given topic. Or if it's some product related thing at Uber, like we've been working maybe a bit myopically on this problem and thinking about it like very, very deeply, right? So whether you know more than him, or you've been thinking more deeply about him than a topic, like Travis could always ask the right questions of you or of anyone, and then you have a bit of a riff together. Really good at sort of challenging your thinking, and then you would always get a better outcome. And you saw that like across like everything. Didn't matter if it was like public policy, or if it was capital markets, or it was product stuff, or math stuff, or engineering stuff, or like market. Like he had the ability like across like every domain to be able to go toe to toe in a collaborative, challenging, productive way with anybody on any topic.
Yeah, Travis is going to be hyper focused, go deep with anyone, and maximize whatever they're doing.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think a couple like just some other things. I mean, he always like excellent at communicating what was important, and really good about that. We always had a drum beat. We always had a drum beat at Uber, and everyone at the company were beating to the same drum. Always knew what the priorities were for the company, like what we were trying to accomplish. I think that's how he was so as we grew so much and so fast too, right? Like that's how I think he was pretty effective at like focusing and like mobilizing people. Just you got that drum beat that just sort of reverberated through the culture in terms of what was important, which we should be working on. One of his, I think, sort of stronger leadership points. Yeah, I mean, a guy's like the intensity is legendary, which is accurate, but like you got a big heart, cares about everybody, and it really, really all adds up to being like you just a super inspiring entrepreneur, guy to work for.
It also translates to like specific metrics that cascaded across the company. It was really clear what numbers we were marching towards.
Yeah.
There was a few key points, and I know obviously you were on the engineering front, but what did you sort of take from that focus on analytics and on numbers and on the specific goals of the company?
Yeah, we were really good at that. I think any startup, any company, really, you got to know what to focus on, and like super high leverage if you're trying to optimize the right thing. And while it can be like pretty counterproductive if you're sort of optimizing for the wrong thing, it's not always easy to know. Early on at Uber, I remember one of the big ones was when we looked at the rider habits and like the stickiness of the app. There was something magic about the third trip. And so if you had a rider, it didn't matter so much over like even kind of what period of time, although of course a bit more condensed, the better. But that third trip was magic. And if someone took a third trip with Uber, they would never churn, and they would use Uber, with more frequency and longer and longer trips. And like early on, we had the churn was negative, which means like if you took all the users that ever signed up for the service, like even averaging in all the zeros for all the riders that churned out and never took Uber again, like your overall like LTV across all your users was growing, because the users that stuck with the system were spending at such an increasing rate that they more than compensated for the riders that churned out. So that like third trip was something that we noticed in the data, and we put like a lot of effort into product stuff and marketing stuff into kind of moving riders through that journey. So we made sure they got that third trip.
If we fast forward a year, the company's now scaling. We're in 5-6 cities. At some point, it was sort of Travis's and Garrett's dream. They sort of conceptualized the business in Paris. So there's a decision to go international, which, especially in retrospect, was crazy that this company based in San Francisco, which is scaling and we're figuring things out, makes a decision to go into Paris, where it's a different language, it's a different currency, and you spearheaded this project in a lot of ways, or definitely were a super active participant.
Yeah, and
When do you
it wasn't 2 or 3 years. It was 18 months. 18 months after we launched, and it was the fifth city was Paris.
What was that project like?
Travis was in Paris with Garrett. I think he was over there with Shervin too. He called us. I think I was sitting next to Curtis Chambers, and Travis called Curtis, who was running engineering at the time, and it was like, I'm in Paris. We need to launch Paris. I want to launch Paris. It was like early November, and he's like, can we do it in 5 weeks? He had a weekend in December. He wanted to launch, and then Curtis just kind of looks at me, and I kind of look at him and just kind of give him a nod, and he goes, he drives the boat. He goes, yeah, we got it. And it was like, that was it. It was like, that was basically the extent of the phone call. We just went back to whatever we were working on, because it was always we're always kind of putting out fires, and we just went back to what we were working on. Maybe 10 days later, we kind of like convened a group. It was like me and Curtis and Amos Barreto kind of worked on our dispatch early on, and then Jordan kind of who did iOS, and we're like, well, guys, we should probably kind of figure out what this is going to take, and you start to kind of like scope it out a little bit, and APIs need to be changed, and currencies, and we've got to like internationalize a code base, and we're like, shit, maybe we don't got this.
And maybe we should have started when we agreed to it.
We have 5 weeks, and now we have 3, and then like at that point it was like full panic, but we just basically didn't leave the office for 3 weeks, and we got it done.
What was the hardest part of that project?
I don't know if any part of it was like particularly challenging. It was just like the breadth of work that you had to do. You had to touch like practically, maybe not quite every line of code, but certainly like every file, a significant amount of part of the code base needed to be touched. So it was really not particularly challenging, but just it was like the volume of work, testing, and it was pretty challenging. And then is what made it challenging, the volume of work. And probably the part of it was maybe the most challenging was just around kind of multi-currency support, which we ended up just kind of hacking in, doing everything in dollars and exchange rates on the fly and everything. And then it was good enough to launch. And then within a couple of months, we had kind of proper currency support.
Yeah, I love that, and definitely learned that at Uber, just the scrappiness, the hackiness of just get it live, and it's usable. We're solving this for customers, and then we'll quickly legitimize it and make it better for the long run.
Yeah, there was just a real just kind of always like an urgency and a commitment to speed, and we just let the needs of the riders, the drivers, like the unique requirements of the geography, like Paris, we really let that like dictate the product roadmap. We just like attacked it like there was no tomorrow.
You go from never having a real engineering job to now being an engineer, and now this company is scaling like crazy. What do you sort of take away from those first couple of years of scaling, of the infrastructure, of sort of the scope of problems? I mean, you talked about, coding challenges. You're now hiring, you're leading teams. What you're running projects. What stands out from that time? What are your sort of core learnings from that time in engineering?
There was always the real balance, I think, between like quality and velocity. Just are you try to churn something out, but are you making a mess of your home? Are you making a mess of your code base in the process? You accumulate technical debt. It slows you down later. There was this just kind of grand opportunity right in front of us, and we just had to take it. So we definitely like kind of erred on the on the side of velocity. But later on, and then the pendulum shifts, right? And then you always pay for it at some point. And then later on, there's a big move towards quality and infrastructure that took place. Probably, the most important thing from a scaling point, probably had like, at least early on, I probably had less to do with like pure like engineering stuff, but it was it was people. Like that's what was special. That's what was special about Uber. Everybody was hyper talented, obsessive and addicted to our work, and really like obsessive and like addicted to each other. We loved, right, Max? I mean,
yeah, family.
Yeah, family. We loved each other, and people were incredibly fun. And then so I think a lot of how you scale is like how you select for that, and from a candidate perspective, kind of who you attract, and then how you select for that.
Yeah, it is someone talented, obviously, but then also, do you want to be around them, and are they going to be as obsessed or more obsessed with this problem? And I don't even think, it's not like we knew that was necessarily the requirements, but that was definitely ingrained in us, and that's why the culture was so transformative during that time.
Yeah, and we we did it in engineering. I think across like other sort of functions in the business, I think the different groups kind of did it in their own way. But like a big sort of hiring philosophy is like, how do you why does an interview room, or why does an interview setting, like it's so different from how you work day to day. So how do you like design a process that like doesn't look like a conventional interview, but looks more like how are we simulating like our everyday work environment? How are we simulating like our kind of interactions and how we'll work together? So when we would interview, we didn't really do like the brain teaser kind of Google stuff. Actually, maybe a little bit of that, but it's kind of more for fun. But we asked people to come in, bring your laptop, bring your IDE, whatever language you want to develop in, and then we would sit down with people and we would code together in like really practical ways to see what people were capable of doing. We do some of that like kind of in a sort of live in the office, but then we also like early on we like the take home challenge, because we get people like some beefy projects to work on, and like on one hand it does allow you to see like a little bit more from a technical perspective on like what they're capable of. You're actually really kind of filtering for like culture and hustle and like how bad they want the job. I mean, if anybody that's applying is probably employed somewhere else, and then we give them some like take home assignment that might take 10 or 20 hours to complete, to do a good job on. And then if somebody's willing to like dedicate that amount of time just on a bit of a flyer that they might be able to like get this job, it certainly tells you a lot about their level of commitment when they join the company. And that it changes over time. I think kind of ran that playbook a lot more in the kind of early years than we did the later years. But that was like really important to how we selected for people and how we interviewed. And then we did we go out, so we take people out to dinner and go have drinks. For a lot of folks, we tried to kind of socialize just a little bit out of the office to just kind of get a feel for people's personalities, and does this feel like a kind of a familial environment to somebody that's going to be intellectually engaging, going to be fun to work with. So sometimes certainly good to have some time in the office, but then to have a little bit of social time out of the office was, I think, pretty helpful too.
You end up moving to New York and opening up an engineering office there. I mean, at this point, you've clearly shown that you're a natural leader, and especially in engineering, I think your talents were super clear. How did you end up moving to New York and kicking that office off? And yeah, what happens at that time when it's just sort of, you're almost creating your own, day one experience?
So yeah, I had the opportunity to kind of do that. It was right around when about 4 years in for me. And then you kind of punch your ticket at that point. You're fully vested. And we did some kind of regreens and top ups and stuff along the way from like an equity standpoint. But like when for the folks that were in it early, you can't really do something for somebody in terms of their equity. Like kind of, years 5 through 8 that's gonna hold a candle to what you got in your initial grant. What I got to do, and I think Travis did a pretty good job of like this for, a lot of the people that were early and kind of hit that 4th year, was kind of like, okay, like what do you want to do, right? What's going to motivate you? Maybe I can't heap another like massive pile of equity on you, but like what's going to excite you? What's going to keep you motivated? And I kind of referenced it earlier, but I'd always like, well, when I was little, I was allowed to live in New York City, so I was kind of, wouldn't that be cool? We had a big business in New York City at that point. We had a big office, Josh Moore and that whole team in New York. I floated the idea of, hey, could I go to New York and could I build an engineering office in New York? And so that was kind of like my, hey, 4 years, congrats. What do you want to do?
From there, you end up spending more time at the company. Obviously, were incredibly influential. As you look back, what are the core learnings that stand out from being so early at Uber and from just the crazy scale that you were a part of?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've touched on, maybe kind of summarize a little bit. I feel like we've like touched on, we've kind of touched on a lot of them. But I mean, I think that just that the people, people first and foremost, it's just an incredible group of people, and understanding what your culture is, and kind of the people you want to attract, and then how to select for that. There's more than one way to skin a cat, but like you gotta, whatever company you work for, you gotta crack that for your company. I think that just, again, we already talked about it, but like urgency and just like a commitment to speed. And there was just always the sense of like, like, why would I let this wait until tomorrow if I could just stay at the office all night? There was a lot of that. Like, again, it's like it's like insane. But when I started at Uber, I was 27. I was 34 when I left. Like, and like a lot of us, we were like young, single. I'm 42. I'm married. I got a family. I couldn't like work in an environment like that now, but I mean that's what it was like. That's what it was. It's what it was like at Uber, and that was, I think that was really like important to our success, because we did so much so fast, right? Max, you asked me about like Paris. It's insane. Like fifth city, 18 months in, when we're doing that global launch, and then you doing self-driving, and we're doing Uber Eats, and just all these things we took on. There was just this real like sense of urgency, like where if like we didn't seize the opportunity like today, like somebody else would. Just another one we kind of hit on, but yeah, like knowing what we're optimizing for. We talked about the kind of the three ride thing sort of later on, and this was like a big part of my engineering journey in New York. Like all of that kind of velocity, sort of moving fast. Like our infrastructure costs were out of control. I think it was I don't think I know, it was over a nickel. It cost over a nickel in like data center costs to do one trip. Software, zero marginal cost, supposed to be anyway. And so there was like a big year-long engineering effort, like push the data center cost of a trip to like under a penny. And so but just there was always that like organizational drumbeat around those priorities. So I think those were some of the key things.
Just quickly on the data centers, we also, all of that was in-house, right? We didn't use any sort of outsourced cloud services. Was that a thing in the early 2010s that people were doing that?
Yeah, it was interesting. We were one of the. Of course, now it's sort of different with AI, and you do need to build a lot of your own infrastructure. But yeah, we were like 2010 or even like some of that early code was like prototyped in 2009. AWS was around, but I think it was just like S3, which is the storage, the file storage system, and then EC2, which was sort of had this server abstraction, but still like kind of a pretty low level abstraction. And now there's so many primitives built on top of all these things, and all these different, probably hundreds of different services that AWS offers. But it was relatively early in that, and we were probably one of the last companies to really to scale on our own without doing it on cloud providers. Just maybe a bit of it was kind of new, so I think there was like maybe a little bit of a inherent sort of distrust around that. Like Is it going to work? Is it going to scale? Or are we not in control of our own destiny? Certainly at some scale, it's obvious it's more expensive to do it that way. Somebody else is kind of making the margin on your infrastructure, and so there was a sense that over the long haul, it would probably be cheaper to build on our own.
As you sort of look back now, your time post Uber, what's been your journey as you just sort of try and find fulfillment in things that you've worked on, after leaving the company?
How are you going to top Uber, right? You and I talked about it the other day, but that whole, I think a lot of us just tried to chase that. How do we're chasing that high, and it was tough for a lot of people. I think it was tough for me for a period of time. You leave that environment. It was like 7 years of intensity and success and hard work and fun, and it's amazing, family and friendships, and then it's like you leave, and then there's definitely a vacuum there, which is kind of challenging. What next? And so I think a lot of people kind of sort of struggle through that to a degree to kind of find your way. What's next. For me, I fell in love with sailing and racing sailboats. Like growing up, predominantly, I mentioned New Jersey earlier, but kind of predominantly Oklahoma and Ohio. Like I never got to spend any time on the water. Certainly, I don't think I'd ever been on a sailboat. But living in San Francisco, of course, always looking over the lid of my laptop, seeing little white triangles bob up and down on the bay. And I never had the time when I was working, but I was like, oh, this is something I'd like to try. And then so when I had a chance to step away, it's like the first thing I did was took some sailing lessons. It's kind of crazy to think that they would do this, but you could take like a one weekend course in San Francisco, which is like one of the gnarliest places in the world to sail, like day in and day out. I mean, the winds just rip. There's tides, there's chop, an active shipping harbor, and then like you do like free A's, and they'll be like, "Hey, great, Rod, you passed your sailing class," and they'll charter you like a 37,
Go out there.
37,
Good
like
luck.
a 37 boat. I took a bunch of friends out that didn't know how to sail, and like we had a really harrowing experience. So I ran the boat up on the rocks on Alcatraz. Came in terrified. I don't think I want to sail anymore. But like, if sailing school doesn't teach you how to sail, how do you learn how to sail? And then anybody that I asked told me, they're like, "Oh, Ryan, you got to race. You got to race. That's the only way to learn." I was like, I don't want to race. I just left this sort of intense kind of working period of my life. I want to like cruise. I want to relax. I think people think about sailing, they think about leisure, and everybody said it doesn't matter. You got to race. So I was like, okay, I'll give racing a try. And then I just straight down the rabbit hole. So that's kind of been my passion post Uber, is racing sailboats.
And now you own a team in a new professional league.
So of course, I kind of everything escalates, but so there's this thing called SailGP. It's a professional sailing league. It was started by Larry Ellison. Look it up. It's sick. It's basically F1 in the water. I mean, they're foiling boats, so they're kind of more like airplanes than boats. And we race 16 iconic locations around the world. Been really fun to kind of get involved. So Larry Ellison started the league. He started 12 teams, and there's 12 nations like have teams. And so I was able to lead the acquisition to buy the US team. And so SailGP USA, check it out. We're actually starting the season. I don't know when this will air, Max, but it's kind of end of November now, and our season is getting underway in Dubai, and you can catch it on CBS.
Love it. All right, so a fun one to end with. What's you're a vivacious reader, something I've always looked up to and admired in you, and always love your recommendations. So what is an interesting piece of content you've consumed lately? And for you, I assume it's a book.
Yeah, it is a book. Good guess. I'm reading one now. It's simply called Backgammon, and I mean, I love sci-fi. This is not sci-fi. It's not nonfiction, and it's like this. It's the seminal text on backgammon strategy. It's the 2004 edition of a book that was originally published in the mid 70s. I won't sell anybody on trying to read a book on backgammon unless you're interested, but I will recommend to people. One of my rules around reading is to try to only read books that stand the test of time. always new content, new books, like new everything. And so I have a pretty lightweight standard that I almost rarely read a book that's been published within the last 5 years. There's obviously like works of literature that have, lasted hundreds or thousands of years or whatever. But like I feel like, hey, if a book was written 5 years ago, people are still talking about it. It's at least not a flash in the pan, and I think it's a pretty good way to kind of select for quality. So yeah, I'm reading a backgammon book that was written in the 70s.
Amazing. Ryan, thank you so much for joining. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Max. It was fun.